The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live on Sky Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
You're very welcome along to the Football Show. Great to have you with us. Joe Molloy here this evening. As ever on a Monday, Mr. Pat Nevin is on the line. Hey, Pat.
How are you doing? Are you well?
We are very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired because I had to drive all the way to London and back from where I live. So that's a 760-mile round trip just to see a game of football. So it was a decent game. So it was kind of worth it, but it's kind of a weird one because the BBC and their wisdom and other companies and their wisdom have decided we can't fly internally. So that flight was going already. I didn't go on it. I had to drive, so I've just made the environment worse. So it's one of those ones where the rules don't make sense. But hey, I had a nice drive.
And are you a audiobook man, podcast man, music man, I suspect maybe, or just silence your own thoughts, Pat?
No. It's definitely audiobooks at the moment. I've just finished Billy Connolly's one, which is cracking. Only a filled K Dick at the moment, but podcasts. I mean, everywhere. Just you can never be bored with podcasts, and of course the music as well. So I'll be honest with you, whispering because my wife's not here in the room just now. I do like that kind of 3 or 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours just driving with your own thoughts. Also gives you ideas as well. So use the time well. It's okay. As long as you don't get stuck in traffic jams, that's the nightmare. And of course, being in London, you're always in a traffic jam.
So Antonio Conte and Spurs, I think, sick of Chelsea jerseys this month. At this stage, there's just a clear gap between the sides, and that's very apparent. Chelsea 2-0 winners at Stamford Bridge. The question I want to ask you first off is that it's 5 years since Conte played a back four. Tuchel similarly seems to be very wedded to his back three as well. Your guess at the thinking or the logic of both managers respectively going into this game to go to back fours?
Well, the funny thing with Chelsea's was it kind of slightly adapted. I asked somebody in the backroom staff just before the game, what system were you playing? And they said, system singular. And it's a really clever sort of line because, you know, when you're not in possession, it's a different system. So you play two different systems. So you actually might end up almost as a 5 when you haven't got the ball, but when you've got the ball, it's an obvious back four. Tuchel, to be honest, he just adapts to it. They sometimes can overthink it, these managers. I think with Conte, I think he was just trying anything. I mean, seeing the team come through from Spurs, there were a lot of defenders in that team. But he's thought of everything. You see, when it comes right down here, after the amount of times he's played against Chelsea, his comments after the game were very pointed and very obvious to everyone. They've given everything. He's tried every system he's got. There's a big old gap between Spurs and where the club want them to be, where he wants them to be, and the quality of players isn't quite there. They can't afford any real, injuries. If they're missing Son, that makes a big difference just now. I talked to you the other week there. I went to see him play against Morecambe, and they're playing not exactly the second string, but a number of the players that would be considered the squad miles away, absolute miles away from the top level. In fact, Morecambe were 1-up for most of that game before they bring the big guns on. So what Conte has come to this time, and he always comes to Conte, he tells the management, right, I've done as much as I could. He hadn't lost a game in the league before they played Chelsea there since Antonio Conte took over, so he's done well. And he's thinking, they'll look at this and say, oh, we're not far away. And he's thinking, I'm miles away. I've done an amazing job to stay this close. And it was a real turning point for Spurs. And I do feel quite sorry for Antonio Conte. He's done a really decent job in a short period of time. He shored it up, as I say, on that sort of streak. It was 9 games without losing in the league. But he knows fine well they're miles away. Had they won against Chelsea, which they never looked like it during the game, had they won against Chelsea, with the 5 points behind Chelsea with 4 games in hand, the worst thing he could have done was win. Because his owners will say, no, we're not giving you any more money. And he needs the money. He needs more strength in that squad. So he tried different things in the game, and he tried the best he could. He went for a back four. To be honest, he's played back three, back five, everything. It looked like a 6 at one point against Chelsea there. He'll try everything. But when you get right down here, he's not got good enough players to go and really challenge for the top four.
Yeah, on the one hand, I think Conte's a big boy and knows how business works and would realistically not have expected 2, 3, certainly 4 big arrivals in January to transform things. And he would be smart enough to say, if we're going to have a big transfer window, it's going to be in the summer. And yet, looking at the table, it's a very interesting state of affairs for Daniel Levy. And you think if they were to speculate to accumulate, they really could make Champions League this season. Manchester United are on 38 points after 22 games. Arsenal are game in hand and 2 points back. So if they win their game in hand, they would go a point ahead of Manchester United, same number of games played. Spurs are the interesting one. They've 2 games in hand. They could, if they were to win their games in hand, they could go 4 clear of United. They could go 3 clear of Arsenal. So Spurs, like, if Conte was to sit down with Daniel Levy, I mean, he really can make the point, we are in this. We could be in the Champions League. That will make all our buys in the summer much easier. That really gets us up and running. Now, are you going to back me? Or are we going to sit in our hands for 6 months, sacrifice Champions League and be off to a standing start once again in the summer? I think they really have to think about backing him in a big way this January, because they're right in the mix here for Champions League.
Yeah, but is Daniel Levy and is the board a bunch of gamblers? Because it's a gamble, and it's a big gamble. You know, Man United are capable of going in a run. You know, look like all the time, but they've got enough good players. You know, as in number of good players, Man United have got more than Spurs. So if they get it together under Rangnick, they could still see them off. Can't see Spurs catching, as you say, Liverpool, Man City. Probably won't catch Chelsea now. So it's really one between 3 or 4 teams there. And it's, you know, is he that much of a gambler he'll throw that sort of money at it? Because he might throw that sort of money at it and then find United do the same. You know, and he's getting himself in a position where we know Daniel Levy doesn't want to get himself into. And being at that stadium the other week there, I mean, they've spent a lot of money on it, and it's fabulous. It's absolutely fantastic. The best, maybe the best, certainly the best in Britain, maybe the best in Europe, arguably the best in the world in world football. It's phenomenal. But, you know, the costs of that, they don't just disappear because the thing's finished. You know, so there's all sorts of problems that he has to work out as a businessman. But Conte doesn't care about that. That's not his gig. He's never cared about that sort of thing. Everywhere he's ever went, he takes care of what the situation is with number one, and he's absolutely right to do that from his position. Because come at the end of the season, or come at the time that he's either leaves or is kicked out, people won't think about that. They'll think about your position in the league in games won and lost. And he has to put as much pressure on as he humanly possibly could. And that argument you're making is exactly the argument he's got to make. But it's still a big, big risk to, you know, go in if it's further debt, bigger debt, and find yourself you still might not get Champions League.
I think it's a good gamble. Rarely you'd say January it's a good time to gamble, but with their games in hand, they're ahead of United, they're ahead of Arsenal. And yes, United could go and spend money in January, but Spurs spending money will make a far bigger difference to Spurs than Manchester United. What's another £40 million player to Manchester United's squad at this stage? Whereas with Spurs, I mean, he's threadbare, so it could make such a colossal difference. I think he went into the job not expecting big things in January, but based on the complexion of the table, I would suspect he has now changed his mind and he sees the route through to Champions League, and that's him way ahead of schedule then.
Yeah. Oh no, he's got more chips than he had when he started, and a lot more chips that he can throw in there. And there's a real chance that, you know, he's saying, look, I'm not being a gambler. I've shown you what I'm capable of doing in this short period of time. So yeah, it's worth it. Levy could come back with, and I think everyone could say this just now, so what's the market going to be like? Right, it's January, so it's not the greatest market. Fine. Who else is in the market with us? And then it starts getting ugly if you're Tottenham Hotspur. Because don't be surprised, you know, Newcastle are chasing players. Will they get players before Tottenham? Will they be able to pay more money maybe? Or make bigger promises in the future? You'll see other teams all through the league are interested in. I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, 1 or 2 comes in at United, comes in at, you know, Liverpool might actually go for 1 or 2 as well, maybe just 1. Liverpool, Chelsea, you know, real teams that will get the nod before anyone else. And Spurs are down that list, but there's teams below. I mean, if you're a football player and you've got a choice between Everton, who will be desperate for players, and Spurs, you'll probably choose Spurs just now. But that's another part of the market you're chasing. And I think people realise just now that It's never a great market, or rarely a great market. You will pay over the odds. And let's be fair, Daniel Levy paying over the odds are two things that don't generally go together.
No, it's what makes this dynamic very interesting. So that's Spurs. Meanwhile, at Stamford Bridge, Pat, is there any word on Thiago Silva? Is he okay? Is there whiplash? How's his back?
I'm different position here. I was co-commenting the game with another Chelsea man, which Jason Cundy, and he didn't think it was a penalty, and I thought it was the most. A free kick. Yeah. I thought it was absolutely clear. Free kick, no concern, not even a question mark over it. Now, people will say that's you just being Chelsea-minded. To be honest, it's not. You're going at that sort of pace, tiny little shove, move momentum, and you fly over. I've watched it time and time and time again, and every single time I watch it, it's more obvious it's a free kick. You're not allowed to shove people off the ball when you're not going for the ball. It's just not allowed, especially not with your hand in the back. Doesn't matter if it's not a big shove. You've actually pushed him and he's lost balance. Yes, Thiago Silva knew what he was doing, waited for it and made the most of it, but he was shoved, and I don't think there's much he could do. So I know there's a few disagreements with that. Most of the refereeing fraternity that I've talked to, that I've listened to, and that I've read, they're exactly the same. They're going, are you joking? That's clearly a foul. You're not allowed to do that, shove someone off the ball. Having said that, there were some ridiculous other calls. I don't know if you saw, if anyone's listening, the Azpilicueta getting wrestled in the penalty area, and you're thinking, what? There were some strange, certainly some strange decisions on that. Spurs can make a big old deal of that. They were second best. They were second best all over the place in Chelsea, and particularly, well, obviously everybody saw what Ziyech done, and on the day he was stunning. You know, not seen him like it. And when you're at the game, seeing all the stuff off the ball as well, his movement, his tackling, his work rate, his fitness, his confidence, all that sort of stuff. I'm thinking, who are you? What have you done with Hakim Ziyech who's been there for a period of time? Well, yeah. All that a different player. It was stunning.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on the Thiago Silva one, by the way. It's almost a free you hate to see given because he played for it so obviously, but it has to be free, just even though it feels uncomfortable. Ziyech is absolutely who I wanted to talk to you about. So he's 28 years of age now, Ziyech, and he arrives from Ajax where his nickname's the Wizard, and you're expecting good things, and he arrives and instantly you get Riyad Mahrez vibes. You know, there's so many comparable aspects there. So he's been there since 2020 and still has less than 40 appearances, and it has never felt like Ziyech bedded in or approached being a mainstay or a man they would turn to or rely on. This is kind of the first time, I would say. This past week is the first time you've thought Ziyech is more than just a very talented, handy squad player who's never going to be there when they really need him. So what do you think's happened here?
Well, it could be a number of things. You can make excuses for players. He had a few injuries. He doesn't get a run of games. You look at all the players that are in that position. You know, Mount's played in that position. Pulisic's played in that position. Werner can play in that position. Havertz can play in that. He's not got a run of games. Also, I've watched him play well within himself. You're not taking chances. Make one mistake and he disappears. See, if you spent your whole... And this isn't football again. This is life. See, if you spent your whole career in a job where everybody thinks you're fabulous and you're wonderful and you can do no wrong, well, to some degree you can't do any wrong. I.e., you can make mistakes and people will just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, have another go. But when you come into a new organisation, a new part of a job, and suddenly you make one or two mistakes, that confidence just, in certain individuals, it just disappears. And it absolutely disappeared with him. He was playing within himself. He was uncertain when it was a perfect ball on, a 60-yard, 50-yard ball on, that he would play with his eyes shut with confidence. He wouldn't even try it. He wouldn't even consider it. So everything was against him. So he gets a boost of confidence, obviously scores against Brighton there. But I honestly, if I had a guess to have to put it down to one basic 100% thing, it's Tuchel. It's Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel's just stuck with him recently. And he's obviously seen something in training. Tuchel's big on that training stuff. If you're doing really well in training, you get a game. And it doesn't matter who you are, you get a game. And he's obviously been doing amazing things in training when there's no pressure on. I think Tuchel's got him aside and just stood with him and talked to him and said, no, keep on doing that, keep on doing that, keep on doing that. In training, understood, right, we'll find out how we can get the best out of this guy. Tuchel, very much like Guardiola, and obviously he is the golden man of coaching just now. He has projects And these players can become projects of his. He wants to get them, work on them. My favourite of his was probably Raheem Sterling. When he got Raheem Sterling and he just made him from a very good player to a player with, almost world class. And for a period of time, his goal scoring, his creation, he's getting his head up. He just completely changed what was a very good player and an exceptional player. And he's done that with one or two players at Chelsea as well. I think this is his latest project. He's just thought, I think I can get the best out of him. It's taken him a while to get around to it because he was considering others like, Werner and Havertz, etc. Pulisic. I think he's just thought, actually, most of them have had good chances. Right, it's your turn, I'll give you a go. And I'll tell you what, I was really surprised he stopped by him. I would have said a month ago, Ziyech was the most likely player to get hoofed out of Chelsea this month. Absolutely. But you've just seen it completely differently. So, yeah, the player's got to work on it. He's got to be confident. But when he has a game like that, and they call him the magician, but that left foot as a wand.
Yeah.
In the first 2 or 3 things he did in the game, you just thought, oh, you're at it. Now, as I say, I was sitting beside Jason, and he just looked at me. We looked at each other and went, oh, we've not seen that.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes later, he's pinging 70 yards without looking at it. It was lovely to see because he's a fabulous player. I want to see good players. It doesn't matter if he plays for Chelsea or Man City or anyone. I just want to see good players playing at their best, and he's got a chance to do that.
Yeah, and it is great because he just has such an obviously high ceiling, because when he first arrived, you could see the Mahrez comparison and you could see all the different tools he had. It's a really fascinating thing, football and confidence and feeling a sense of assurance in your environment, because there are certain players at the bigger clubs where it feels like it's the club stage and the fans' stage and the player is happy to be there. Like Timo Werner. For Timo Werner, I watch him play, he does not feel Stamford Bridge is his stage. And I would have said somewhere yesterday, around the time when he'd scored the first, and then do you remember a ball broke to the edge of the area and he thrashed it one outside of the boot, cut across it and straight at the keeper, and the crowd love it, and he kind of trots on. That was Ziyech saying, "Oh, this is my stage now. I've the balance of power has shifted here from fans in Chelsea to I'm sort of running the show here a little bit." And it's a beautiful thing to watch that happen with a player. Sometimes I'm sure you felt it on certain days.
It is. No, absolutely. I know the feeling. When I talk about someone like this, I'm very comfortable knowing exactly what he's going through. And everything you said there was correct, but there's one bit in the middle of it was nailed, absolutely nailed on. Right. So he looked as if he owned it. Yeah. But it was the reaction of the fans.
Yes.
He's not had that reaction. It was, you've absolutely nailed it there. Because when he got that, he looked a different shape, he stood differently, he ran differently. He just thought, I'm performing to you now.
Yeah.
And it's totally different. And it was the fans. And football fans, knowledgeable football fans, and most football fans that are going, are knowledgeable and will know when to react right. And also, on top of that, they saw him working hard. So if you've got a guy who's working hard, and then the fans go, oh, we're with you, and then they lift him, and then they see him lifting, it then becomes this symbiotic thing where they all just lift higher and higher. And you could feel it, you could watch it, it's slightly spine-tingly when you could see this kind of happening. And it was lovely. It's lovely to see. And again, underline, it doesn't matter who it is, it doesn't matter who they play for. I just love to see that happening, and it's 100% it's not been with him. They've never had that reaction from Stamford Bridge fans, and then they knew by half time before he even scored that goal. And I think we'll call it that goal for quite a long time because the bend on it. It was really weird. I was right behind that goal, right behind, so right on a line with it, and it's played at great pace. He's hit it at an enormous kind of curl. But it's also languid as well. And you can't help but say, the world just stopped. Everything just stopped, and we all went, as it went in. And it seemed to take an eternity before it went in, but it was lashed. Honestly, it was an absolutely brilliant moment. And it was that ability to do these weird, different things. There was a moment during the first half, he'd put a couple of great crosses, one into Hudson-Odoi. But it was on the left-hand side, and he played one in. But he played it at this weird angle. It was like arrowed with his left foot pinged, and I think, don't know anyone else who plays that cross. I mean, certainly not at Chelsea. Very, very few people. De Bruyne can play it sometimes, but rarely does. But it was a very odd angled ping that you just don't see. You mean, like the Fabregas when Arsenal used to do things like that. It's exciting. It's really exciting to watch.
It's a lovely thing when that happens in sport. So Everton, then, there's all sorts of things going on here. There's a touch of the old school with Duncan Ferguson buying fans first round of drinks at various pubs outside the stadium. You think, okay, fine. It's you would think that stuff is just pandering, but when Big Dunk does it, it goes down very well. You have Farhad Moshiri releasing statements and putting another 100 million quid onto the balance sheet to ease the debt somewhat, but that not really registering with fans, even though it's 100 million quid. And of course, you have Bill Kenwright in the midst of it all, pleading with fans, flanked by policemen outside the stadium and not getting very far with the fans, as you might imagine. And they're saying, well, sack the board and Kenwright out of our club. In the midst of all that, would you give Wayne Rooney the job?
Do you know, I'm struggling who to think to give the job. The dangers of Wayne Rooney, he's a young manager. It could go awful. Can you remember Shearer took over Newcastle?
Yeah.
When they were in it, it didn't go well, did it?
It was great. It was great fun.
But it didn't go well.
No, it didn't go well, but it was interesting. See, I'm speaking here. I just want entertainment, so I'm all for it. But
if I'm speaking with an Everton hat on and saying, like, but the reason why I'm hesitant is because you had Rafa Benitez, and he's a good manager and a good coach and a good technical coach, very, very good at all those things. So are you going to get somebody who's higher up the tree than him? I'm not sure at the moment. I don't know who's around. I don't know.
Do you know much about this Vitor Pereira?
You know, it's one of those classic things. You know, everybody suddenly, if you are hot as a manager for a wee point in time, and you've got this really exciting, and you think, actually, you don't know his capabilities in this league. And this league is the most important part about it. And we've seen so many come over who have the hot new thing, and then 2 minutes later they're gone and they're an idiot and they're useless, etc. It's a huge, huge chance to take. If it was possible, and if there was anyone around, it would be one of the great old coaches who's available, who's out of work and can do you 6 months and saves you. But who is that just now?
It was Rafa.
It used to be an Ancelotti.
It would be Rafa.
It'd be Rafa. It used to be Ancelotti.
Yeah.
The next one you make, and you know, the chances of you getting Potter from Brighton to walk away from Brighton at the moment, the way they're playing, and walk into Everton, look, the money is something. You obviously can make a lot more money. So it's a long, long time to have sat and thought, do you know, I don't really know the answer for Everton just now, because it looks really, really quite ugly. What they do need is they need to strengthen the squad very, very quickly. Yeah. There's somebody started, I think it was Cascarino at the start of the season. Everyone puts down there who's going to get relegated and who's going to be top four. And he's the only person I heard saying Everton. And you look at it now and you go, there's a man who understands gambling. And he looks at he doesn't look at what people think or history. He just looks at A, the numbers, and B, the personnel. And he must have thought, yeah. And I don't know if they'll get relegated, but they're absolutely in it. And whoever takes over now has got a monster job in their hands.
And have you a feel for the job Rooney's done at Derby? Have you seen enough of them?
Yeah, it's a better job than I possibly expected. So yeah, he's been firefighting a lot of the time. So he knows he's going to have to go and firefight at Everton. It's one of the worst times in some degree to take over at Everton Football Club. So it doesn't matter if you are Wayne Rooney or whoever. It's going to be a tough one. What I would say, it's not a stupid idea.
Yeah.
Maybe in times going past, I would say, yeah, it's a stupid idea. And it's a panic idea, but it's not at this point.
It's not at this point. Because you know the way you said it's a terrible time to take over. Often you would say a team like Everton with the 7th highest wage bill in a 15th place, they're in such a false position. It's a great time to take over because you won't have to do an extraordinary job to jump up several places. You kind of think, a la your reference to Cascarino, actually they may just about be that bad despite having the 7th highest wage bill. So it is a bad time, genuinely.
And it's a bad time because we noticed that the real players, the real movers and shakers, if they get injured, you're stuffed. If you're without Richarlison, you're stuffed. You know, if you're without Dominic Calvert-Lewin, you're stuffed. And they've missed him for the last parts of the season. And some of the players that have come up and they're coming through slowly, yeah, fine, they're okay. But are they going to be absolutely good enough to get you out of what is a dire situation? It's getting towards a dire situation. Have a look below. Everybody's capable of flying up. Burnley are capable of going on a run. They always seem to do it at some point. Newcastle are already beginning to make their move. For goodness sake, Norwich have won. Is it 2 in a row now?
Yeah, they've got it going. Adamida, this is what it's all about. The relegation situation is weird because games in hand are all over the shop. It's actually hard, and lower down it's harder to predict results. So there's a weird psychology at play down there where you think a team are in desperate trouble and then you realise they've 2 or 3 or 4 games in hand on certain people.
Yeah,
and the Ranieri news came through as well this afternoon. So Watford have sacked Ranieri after 3 months. I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, the sun sets in the west. Like, of course Watford sacked someone. It's just a bizarre club. I was listening to TalkSport this morning and I heard a Watford fan ring up and say, we're a complete laughingstock the way we run the club. It's actually embarrassing. I mean, he's right. The only thing I would say is no one cares enough that they are. No one's laughing because no one even pays any interest to them. They're just a bizarre entity all in themselves at the moment.
But they managed to stay in the Premier League quite long, for a longer period than a lot of people have thought when you look at the history of the club.
Yeah.
So they've kind of punched above their weight for some period of time. But eventually that won't work. It just eventually, if you keep on twisting and twisting and twisting, you'll get bust. I'm getting too many of these card analogies here. People think I'm a gambler. I don't gamble. But no, so them, you never know. They might make the next twist and it might actually win. But you wonder how much real thought is real knowledge there is behind it. So they are absolutely a concern just now. But everyone else is capable of going on a run just now. And for all the fact that I thought Norwich, and still think they'll struggle to get out of it because in terms of pure quality they're limited, I've never really thought Newcastle were certainties. I've always thought there's this phrase I said to you a few months back, they need to cling on and be in touching distance when January comes. They're in touching distance. And I just wouldn't be surprised if they get out of it at all.
Yeah.
I'm almost getting towards the stage I'd be surprised if they actually go down now. They're that capable. I've been to too many of the games now. The fan base does incredible things for them, and if they can keep the important players fit, obviously they're missing one at the moment. It's not good news if he's your scorer, but generally I think they're going to be good enough. So if they're going to do that, that's back to Everton. They're getting dragged into it again, and the points that they've got just now is not enough to be comfortable. Nowhere near it.
Claudio Ranieri, for the record, got 14 games, so he had just over 3 months. He's the 15th manager since the Pozzo family took over in 2012, so 15 managers in just under 10 years. I presume you would hate to be a player in that environment where every manager is in effect a lame duck manager. Like, we were worried about Ralph Rangnick here, but every manager is a lame duck manager. It must feel so... Can you imagine how sick they all must be of the new manager coming in to do the first pep talk and how, we're going to go for it together? And, I just, ugh, horrible.
Right. I know exactly what players do in that situation, right? You become unbelievably selfish. That's what they do. Right, earning my wages, I'm getting my money, I'll just put my head down and work hard. If it goes all wrong and they go down, I'm going to just try and put myself in the shop window to make sure I'm available to somebody else. The kind of love of the club stuff, they'll say it all and they'll kiss the badge maybe, but it's not that anymore. If it's complete mercenary attitude from the upper echelons, then they'll behave that way too. And that's exactly how they're behaving just now. So, the manager will come in, they'll try and do something, they'll want to do their best for him, but in the end, why would you believe in it? There's no reason why you should believe in it. It'd be stupid to believe in it.
Yeah, it sure would. Listen, we are pretty much out of time. Yeah, go on. I was going to say whatever else took your fancy.
Crystal Palace against Liverpool. I'm sure quite a few people who watched the game saw the lad Olise on the right wing for Palace. And I love the guy Eze. Eze's my favourite player for going by players, but he's been injured and he's not himself. And I've watched Olise a couple of times now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Just wow. I've never seen anyone do that to Robertson and other players as well. And it's not a fluke with him. I've seen enough of him. I don't think he'll be there that long. He's a player. He's a great. Keep an eye on him.
Antonio Conte, swoop in, get moving.
No, I'll tell you what, because he just pure creativeness, and he's obviously capable of doing it against very, very good teams in the Premier League. I would be looking very close at him right now.
Interesting. Pat, we're out of time. Thanks so much.
Speak to you soon.
Cheers. Pat Nevin with us there, live on the line. Brought to you by Sky, as ever, our football show. Watch big games from the Women's Super League live on Sky Sports. We'll take a short break. And you're welcome back. Joe Molloy with you this evening. Off the ball dynamic duo on the line. We have Ronan Mullen and Enda Call. Gents, how we doing?
Hey Joe, how are you?
All good, Joe, all good.
And I didn't really get into it with Pat. The title race, a glimmer, just a slight opening, a touch of light through the door maybe after Man City were held by Southampton. Not for the first time, by the way. Southampton seem to do quite well against Man City. Liverpool, if they win their game in hand, are back to 6 points. Then they go to the Etihad, they beat Man City, they're back to 3 points, and suddenly we're all very excited again. I just can't quite bring myself to think it very likely.
No, I think Man City still look pretty invincible at this point in time. You know, they're not going to win every game. I see Pep did his usual carry on off talking about how good the performance was despite not getting the result that he wanted. He said it was by far their best performance of the last couple of weeks. So a stumble for Man City, but yeah, the difference between Man City and Liverpool squad depth, I just think Man City will end up, cruising still to the end.
Yeah, it does. It feels that way. It's hard to know sometimes if Pep is being genuine or is being deliberately, obviously sarcastic, Ronan, when he talks about how good their performances are when they were so obviously not their best performance or performances of the season.
Yeah, I think it's just his way of mitigating the criticism that he perceives might come along, with a non-win for Man City, because even by all accounts, dominated swathes of that game. And while you said, Southampton seem to have their number in certain facets of it, they can disrupt them and seem to start fast. And, that was the case the other day with the goal and another disallowed goal. So things could have gone their way on another day. But yeah, I think that is just Guardiola's way of saying my approach is invincible, as Enda says, and irrespective of what the opposition bring to the table, we're going to perform at an elite level, and he feels like they did the other day.
So just to throw something at you both, reviewing the Sunday papers yesterday, I missed this piece which is very interesting on Gary Neville in the Sunday Business Post. It's by Aaron Rogan, and it's about Gary Neville and speculation, and it is only speculation, that he's about to dip his toe into politics. Right back to left wing is the headline of the piece. So let me throw some stuff at people in case they didn't see it in the Sunday Business Post. Aaron Rogan here is talking about Neville's, increasingly he's been very political, even on Sky Sports at times, and there was the Friday night football match at Brentford where Neville and Carragher are talking about how this is definitely a workplace and not a party. But he did say last September to the Times, I'd love half an hour across from Boris Johnson at Westminster. I'd be angry with myself if I didn't tear him to shreds just on the basic principles of behaviour. And the piece charts then how he criticised the Labour Party leader Keir Starmer in April 2020 for abstaining on the Conservatives' tiered system of lockdown rules. He campaigned for better economic supports for businesses. He has recently joined the Labour Party with rumours growing that he's going to run for office. So Starmer was on LBC Radio, said he's a big fan of Neville. Gary should go as far as he wants, said Starmer. And the comments came after Neville had revealed he'd joined the party when he was on the BBC show Political Thinking with Nick Robinson, and he was talking about his political outlook. Very Tony Blair-esque, I would say. Surely there is a society where people who are doing well still want to look after people who aren't doing well, and we want to drive them up. And Nick Robinson said, well, you sound very like Tony Blair. And Neville said, is that not what we all think? So he's certainly not a Jeremy Corbyn Labour Party type. And it turns out as well, I hadn't realised this, Keir Starmer has had what he says are a number of conversations with Neville. So Keir Starmer says, Gary thought I wasn't been strong enough during the pandemic, and we had conversations about that. Neville did tell Nick Robinson that he feared he'd be eaten alive in Westminster. He said, I'm able to communicate. I know what I want. I've got a business mind. I can manage people in respect to business. I can only imagine what you have to do in Westminster to survive, though, and I don't play the game. So how can I get in? So when I ask myself the question, do you want to dip your toes into politics? I can't dip my toes in because I'm all or nothing. I go in and I'm going in. And he was asked if that meant he was going to become an MP. He said, I don't know at the moment. I'm not saying never. And Aaron Rogan here says, a more agreeable path maybe to attempt to succeed Andy Burnham as Mayor of Manchester when he moves on to run as an MP in the next general election. So all pretty interesting. You do get the sense with Neville, not least because he said it himself, that he doesn't see himself in punditry for much longer and maybe feels he's done all he can do. It definitely has given the impression he still enjoys the co-commentary, but in terms of Monday Night Football and just speaking out on issues, he feels like he's almost said everything he has to say. He has an ego, so you can see the appeal of politics, though they all have egos. That's not a great criticism at Neville. Hard to think of many people who go in without some kind of ego, and you suspect to be well-intentioned. Runs a business with 600 people, so he's shown himself capable in that respect. It is an interesting prospect, Ronan, Gary Neville, MP for Manchester, or Mayor of Manchester, to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and get the ball rolling is probably the key point there, because when it comes to it, it's an ambassadorial role, really, mayorship in England. And while it can lead to other things, as was evidenced by what Boris Johnson's gone from, his role in London to leading the country, I can't see that path quite for Gary Neville, but you could sense him being frustrated in a role which is more symbolic and, less boots on the ground, and he would undoubtedly want to manoeuvre himself into a position where he's having tangible influence and impact on things. And you can see in how he unquestionably led the debate on the Super League and the breakaway six within the Premier League. As much as we like to give the institutions like BT and Sky Sports credit for how they built the narrative around that, it was a one-man mission as far as I can remember. It was in the middle of a commentary game. He basically set out the stall of football at large, and within 24 hours it had reversed course. So there's no question, I think he will think he can do that on a grander scale. And you look at his life and career to date, it's quite a career arc from couldn't make it as a centre back at Man United to being a good right back to being the key component in that David Beckham relationship. Succeeded basically throughout his playing days. The only real mishap he's had so far is his approach at management, his attempt at that with Valencia, because he's been a runaway success as a pundit, possibly the best football pundit in the UK. And with that, in that mindset, it's hard for him to think he can't succeed if he turns his hand to this as well. So it will be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the wheels definitely seem to be in motion at this point.
Yeah, they do. I agree with you on the Super League thing. I do feel it was a bit of a one-man operation as well, and he just was so convincing that everybody rode in behind him very strongly. It's striking to me, he says to Nick Robinson, that he did fear he'd be eaten alive in Westminster. I would imagine he would sail in on the polls and really capture the imagination, and there'd be much fanfare, and there'd be pictures outside Westminster. Georgia Lee had a kind of similar thing here, maybe a decade ago now. And I think Enda, he would get in there and realise how pointless it all was, and would do a term or less and just resign in frustration at the machinations of Westminster politics, to be honest.
Yeah, I think one of the phrases he used was playing the game, and I think that is something that from the outside in, looking at Gary Neville's personality on air at least, is something that he would probably struggle with in just playing the Westminster game. But I thought it was interesting that the headline went with from right back to left wing, because it sounds like Gary Neville's viewpoints are very much centrist based, which is, I guess, what the Labour Party is. But I would find it very interesting to see how it would go if he did get involved heavily within like an MP role, for example, how that would end up, because it's not as if Tony Blair, who his views are compared with in this piece, is exactly a popular figure amongst the British public at the minute, not least because of his issues with the war, but also his movement for the Labour Party towards the centre. So I would find it very interesting to see what the public opinion of Gary Neville would end up being in 10, 15 years if he turned to politics and turned to an MP who did in fact play the game. So look, there's a big difference between talking about the Super League on Sky Sports and being a person who is responsible for thousands of people potentially, getting food, getting paychecks, having jobs, things like that. It's a lot more responsibility. So it's a deep dive for Gary Neville if he does choose to do it.
Well, like I said, it's just speculation. It's from a piece in the Sunday Business Post on the back, I suppose, of the interview he did with Nick Robinson on BBC last week. So a few other things going on just before we wrap up for the evening. Richard Arnold, Ronan, staying on the Man United theme, is reaching out to Gary Neville, amongst others. I mean, the man's influence knows no bounds. So Richard Arnold is taking over for Ed Woodward, and Daniel Taylor had a piece in The Athletic. So it seems Arnold is reaching out to Neville, he's reaching out to Scholes, you would suspect Ferdinand as well. All of the big names in British punditry at the moment, trying to get them on side effectively. And I think it's a very smart thing to try and do. If you can soften their cough even a touch, then you'll feel the benefits for months.
Yeah, and one of the sort of more wry quips in this Athletic piece is that Ed Woodward said off the record, but half serious, that one of the biggest mistakes he made during his tenure was not hiring Gary Neville in a formal capacity, because to your point, he's become the arbiter of the Manchester United mood almost, and how they frame things and their opinions, the fan base at large. So I think that's exactly it. I think in a formal or informal way, to get the likes of Neville, Ferdinand, Scholes, these lads who haven't been averse to criticising the regime more so than the management, because for all that, the likes of Neville have come under fire for not, going to town on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when he was having, those difficult times. He wasn't afraid to go after Woodward in particular around that Super League fiasco. So I think that's more the point, that brand Man United need to be pulling all in the one way, and that's probably the reasoning behind it. So Richard Arnold, in so much as he's seen as a continuity, plan with like basically Ed Woodward 2.0, there is a sense with this at least that he's trying to put his own stamp on things.
Yeah. And Stephen Gerrard, just to finish on Gerrard, because we were talking with Pat about Everton there, and he's now 11 games into his Aston Villa tenure, 5 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw. You're liking what you're seeing here in Gerrard. Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, well, I mean, I obviously watched him a lot with his management of Rangers as well, and we're into the period now where players that we watched as generational talents are going into management, and I genuinely think that Gerrard might be the best of the crop in terms of the Artetas and the Lampards and the rest of them. I think he's a manager who has a clear idea, knows what he wants, knows the players that suit the system that he's trying to play, and has shown already that he can step up in the levels. Because, I mean, Frank Lampard going to Derby, that's all well and good, but Steven Gerrard took a real risk going to Rangers at the period that they were in. And I mean, he won the trophy in the most important season for Celtic in the Scottish Cup or the Scottish League. So he's shown that he can handle the pressure as well. So I think he's got a really good team at Aston Villa. And he was speaking at the weekend as well, this guy. And he essentially wants to get European football with this Aston Villa team. And genuinely, if he gets another year with them and gets a few more transfers in, I think really the sky's the limit for this Aston Villa side. I think there's some really excited talent at the club. And under the guise of Gerrard and Michael Beale as well, who should definitely get a mention in the credit for Gerrard, I think they should be European challengers next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less sure, just by dint of a certain scepticism, and it's unlikely that someone of Gerrard's talent as a player will be as good as a manager. Just law of averages say it's unlikely, but the early signs are pretty impressive, you've had to say. And I didn't see him as much at Rangers as you because, well, you know. But
why is that, Joe?
Well, look, I'm a less dedicated Scottish football fan to you, to be fair. But the Gerrard thing, what's most promising is that a player of his stature has a very obvious humility, as well as this like cast iron belief in himself, which is there. But the humility to bring in McAllister, who I suspect is of a seniority in terms of being able to challenge him just by dint of age. And then Michael Beale, who you mentioned, who is this incredibly highly rated coach. That's an incredibly shrewd thing to do, because Beale was interviewed and was saying that he does a huge amount of the coaching and Gerrard steps back a lot and steps in when he feels the need to say something. And Gerrard was asked about Beale really taking charge on the pitch. He said, it would take me 15, 20 years to become as good as Michael Beale as an on-pitch coach, delivering sessions daily. So I let Mick be Mick because he's the expert. It's very tempting for a player of Gerrard's stature to say, well, I mean, Michael Beale, yeah, but I'm Steven Gerrard and I've seen it all and done it all, so I'm going to take the on-pitch sessions. So I thought that gave me a real kind of sense of hope for what he might do. Because I'm not sure every generational talent feels that way about the training sessions.
No, and one of the key issues that you actually see with these former player turned managers is that they go onto the training pitch and they're better than the players that they're actually coaching, and that causes issues amongst the camp, as well as them sort of getting frustrated.
Gerrard could be the Glenn Hoddle of the Villa training sessions.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Gerrard could have turned out to be a player who was able to ping these balls in for 40 yards and is wondering why Buendia isn't doing it for Aston Villa. But it seems like he actually has a grasp for what he wants to do as a coach and is willing to delegate very well. And I mean, look at Alex Ferguson. He delegated most of his career, and that's what it takes. I mean, if you let your ego get in the way of what you're trying to do, then that can be a real stumbling block. But it seems, at least at the base of it, that Gerrard has a good eye for delegation, and it's going to be interesting to see if they part ways with McAllister and Beale, what Gerrard does then from then on. But at this point in time, it's a really good partnership that's worked so far for him.
Okay. Fellas, thanks for that. Cheers, Ronan. End it. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers, Joe.
Cheers, lads.
Football show is, as ever, brought to you by Sky. Watch big games from the Women's Super League live on Sky Sports.